Selamat datang di Pulau Surga, di mana alam berbaur bersama jiwa. Di sini kami memberi lebih dari sekedar keindahan. Di sini kami menawarkan kebudayaan. Di tempat ini kami menciptakan kerinduan. Dan di sini kami membuka pengalaman, menggali lebih dalam, lebih dari sekedar menikmati alam. Aku rindu Labuan Bajo.
There is a critical disconnect between capital and impact in Asia. And what we find is that the holders of capital want to deploy it more effectively to achieve positive social and environmental outcomes. However, the knowledge, the networks, and the communities amongst these holders of capital, particularly the future impact leaders, are nascent and underdeveloped. So keeping all of that in mind, we decided to launch the AVPN Academy.
The Academy is for anyone looking to increase their experience and knowledge of social impact, whether you're just starting out or if you're an experienced professional in the space and want to expand your repertoire and build new skills. The topics we cover will respond to the needs of the ecosystem. They will span the gamut of social investment approaches, from philanthropy, impact investing, to social finance, corporate social impact, and others.
There is no other cross-cutting platform that is focused solely on Asia, with content provided by practitioners for other practitioners to learn from each other.
We're really excited to jointly develop the Social Finance Center. We believe that social finance, blended finance, and results-based financing are some of the key drivers to help us all reach the sustainable development goals.
Now, there isn't always an opportunity within a hectic day to set aside time for learning. So the Academy will offer a range of self-paced modules that you can pick up and complete at your leisure. There will also be a range of resources on our library so that you can dig into a topic at depth. You may also join one of our live virtual classes for interaction, engagement, and potentially collaboration around a new approach or way of thinking.
There is a need for training in this discipline, especially as the field becomes more and more strategic. But we all need to start somewhere. So while many people across the region have passion and desire, they all lack some knowledge of what a CSO role should cover. This center is set up to support you.
So the opportunity to join the fellowship program coming from my Spreadable network as AVPN came along, it was frankly a no-brainer. Not only are we getting exposed to a sound and practical understanding of the world of impact investing, but also get connected with the community of practitioners across multiple organizations in Asia who would help challenge and help me grow beyond the fellowship itself.
You know, I was just thinking to myself, wow, if only I had this at the time when I stepped out from my previous roles in the group to take on this at that time called CSR role. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of frameworks, methodologies, and I must say, you know, in some regard to muddling our way through.
The best lesson that I learned during the program is actually how to become a data-driven fund manager and investor by leveraging different tools for risk assessment and also for the impact management.
I'm incredibly excited about the Academy. In the short period of time that it has existed, we've actually created a community of like-minded individuals that I think will actually support each other and share with the wider ecosystem in Asia their learnings as they embark on this exciting journey to move capital towards impact.
The AVPN philanthropic funds are very important to the community, to both the funders as well as the grantees, because we are facing an unprecedented crisis in Asia. There's a need to deploy funding fast, but the question is to whom and how can we amplify the impact of our work.
You often see emergency responses taking away a lot of bandwidth from people who should be focused on the responses, because the help that arrives is so splintered, often very duplicative.
The lack of proper infection prevention and control practices and preparedness, which, as we have all come to realize, is crucial for protecting our communities. In particular, smaller and remote health facilities struggle the most in this aspect due to the limited availability of resources.
We are very happy to be able to bring together 6 funders to support solutions pertaining to healthcare needs, as well as COVID response and resilience in 4 Southeast Asia countries: Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia.
So by having different funders come together for the food fund, it allows us to work together to break down silos, and we are seeing really different types of profiles of funders coming together. Organizations do not have to start from scratch, and more importantly, it's a learning journey for everyone.
And the more you work in philanthropy, the more you recognise and value the lens that other funders have and how they look at the same situation and the same grantee and the same kind of broader challenge in particular kind of context. And that learning is priceless.
Personally, I just think it's a really interesting way to engage. And so often we are operating a little bit insularly, in our own organisations, and you're trying to get things done, and caught up often in your own activity. And it's really great to have the opportunity to just step back and hear from others about what they're doing. To, as I say, kind of benchmark yourself informally against where you're up to. If we take this fund that we're a part of, as an example, we can kind of apply it. We can take some of the lessons from that and apply it to other philanthropy.
Understanding that providing unrestricted funding is very important, not just for the grantee organizations, but it's very important for the funding community to consider a different model of working that can amplify their impact, to recognize that together, once we understand that we are moving beyond projects, we are really supporting these organizations to be more resilient. If we invest in such a model, it will help us to build the ecosystem faster, it will make it stronger, and together we will be able to create more impact, and we are able to truly mobilize capital towards impact.
With the addition of funding from AVPN's philanthropic pool fund, ISE will be able to maintain and strengthen our primary healthcare systems to mitigate the effect of COVID-19 on the treatment of other diseases, as well as effectively respond on COVID-19 pandemic through infection preventions and control in refugee camps.
We try to have grantees at the forefront and grantee kind of well-being and enabling them to do their job better. And collaborative philanthropy facilitates that if it's done well, because it reduces the burden on grantees to host multiple applications.
Good morning. Salamat pagi. Suprabhat. Over 6 plenaries, 42 breakout sessions, workshops, networking experiences, small group sessions, the AVPN Global Conference 2022 agenda promised to provide a deep dive into the cross-cutting thematic areas that represent the most pressing challenges in the region across various subjects of climate action, gender equity, sustainable finance, blended finance, education, livelihoods, navigating all the grays and intersectionalities between them. And of course, we have enjoyed watching you huddle on the sidelines as well. So we've crossed the halfway mark, and you have 2 full days ahead. Hope you make the most of the sessions ahead. At the start of day 3, let's pump up to the energy of the day 1 decibels that we had witnessed. Can we give ourselves a round of applause and fill this Mangapura hall with positive vibrations that you all have brought to this conference? I'm repeating myself, but like Chris Anderson said about generosity, positive vibrations are infectious too. So let's have one more round of applause, please. It's a powerful mental and physical stimulant. Woo-hoo, yay. Thank you so much for being a wonderful and sporty audience. Let the games resume. So, without ado, let's go into the keynote, introducing you now to our first keynote at this morning's plenary. A recognized leader and innovator in the social impact sector, author of best-selling book, The Blue Sweater, Bridging the Gap Between Rich and Poor, our next speaker started Acumen in 2001 and since has invested more than $146 million of patient capital into 151 companies, affecting the lives of nearly 400 million people across Africa, Latin America, South Asia, and the United States. She has been named one of the top 100 global thinkers by Foreign Policy, one of 25 smartest people of the decade by Daily Beast, and one of the world's 100 greatest living business minds by Forbes, which also honored her with the Forbes 400 Lifetime Achievement Award for Social Entrepreneurship. Lest I go out of breath with this stellar introduction, handing Jacqueline Novogratz, founder and CEO of Acumen, to our audience here this morning. Give her a loud round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as I invite Jacqueline on stage to share more.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm just waiting for a slide to go up, but it will go up. And so I just want to start with gratitude. This is not the slide. There's a slide of a beautiful woman with these sparkly eyes, and she was one of 4 women I met. It's the next one, please. Well, so this is the wrong presentation, which is okay. I am not going to use slides, so be really nice to me. So thank you. So picture this woman with beautiful sparkly eyes and an incredible face. She was one of 4 women I met at this factory outside of Aurangabad, India, where she and her friends were breaking bricks and head-loading them to a nearby factory. And I was so struck by this woman. It was only momentary, but we had this moment of joy where it was so clear they were embracing me as a guest rather than rejecting me as a stranger. And I hold her face, her smile, as a reminder that every one of us has light inside of ourselves, and that every day, millions of people just like her around the world toil and labor to produce the goods and the services that we count on for our lives and too often take for granted. Gratitude. Gratitude, too, for those on whose shoulders we stand. I was lucky to talk to Tamara, the daughter of the great, recently passed Sir Fazl Abed, who founded Brock. And I got to tell her that 35 years ago, I was so inspired by Abed and his dream and his work that I started off on my path. Gratitude to all of you for the work that you do. For each of you understand what Dorothy Day talked about when she spoke of the long loneliness of doing this work of change. It's hard. And gratitude for this generation to come. May they have the wisdom of those who came before and the courage to jettison what no longer works, because only they will solve their problems, truly. And we face big ones. We've been talking about them for the last few days. Not only unsustainable inequality and climate crisis, but also the lack of truth or belief in truth with fake news and our growing dividedness and divisiveness. We need to come together. We all understand that we need to reimagine all of our systems, not just our health systems and our education systems, but our democracy, our financial systems. And so how do we do that? We need to build on a new set of tools and also a new framework for how we lead. But underneath it, we must start with a framework, a moral framework that understands that we are each other's destiny, that our action and our inaction can impact people every day all around the world. That we understand that problems over there can no longer be seen as those people's problems, but they are our problems, because they ultimately will come to us over here. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time through the tools that I understand and through the kinds of character that I believe are needed for this next generation. The tools that we've built at Acumen start with the right kind of capital. And if there's one message for the impact investors and the philanthropists, is that we need to use our capital and to move it to where it's most needed and not just to where it's safest. 21 years ago at Acumen, we started with this idea of patient capital as our one tool. We would raise philanthropy and we would invest in entrepreneurs that were trying to solve big problems of poverty like agriculture and energy, healthcare and education. Patient, 10 to 15 years patient. We would accompany those entrepreneurs not only with our financial capital, but with our social capital, our connections, to other entities. We would help them raise money. Any money that came back would be reinvested in other innovation to solve problems of poverty. You heard the stats on our patient capital, but over time, as these companies grew, we understood that they needed more traditional investment capital. So we started a series of impact funds and are now managing about $250 million in 4 different impact funds, and are starting to build a series now of different pools of capital in more sophisticated ways because our problems are more sophisticated. But what we've learned over the past 21 years is that when you use the right kind of capital and invest in the right kind of character, we can do really big things, just not by ourselves. We were asked at this conference to focus on the SDGs, and I'd like to focus on SDG 7, or universal electrification. In 2007, 1.5 billion people on the planet had no access to electricity. 1.5 billion, 140 years after Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. So the markets clearly weren't working, but neither was government. 2 young guys, Sam Goldman and Ned Tozun, came into our office with this $30 solar lantern and a dream to eradicate kerosene. They had the kind of audacity that my husband Chris talked about the other night, but so did they have humility. And when you put those 2 together, the humility to see the world as it is and the audacity to imagine what it could be, you have what we call the moral imagination. Because while they knew what they needed to do at that macro level, they didn't understand anything at the micro level. They had the humility, though, to see low-income people as full human beings, not as beneficiaries, not as passive recipients waiting for a handout, but as individuals who want to solve their own problems, to have the dignity of what it means to be a customer. And then they had the humility to listen and to learn what were the obstacles that got into individuals' ways to prevent them from buying solar. Neither they nor we, after we put our first 250,000 in, had any understanding. We knew people were low income, but not that they had no trust, not that they had very little distribution, almost no infrastructure. What they had in abundance around them was bureaucracy, corruption, complacency, the kerosene mafias and the diesel mafias that had every incentive not to let solar work. And so for the first 6 or 7 years, we thought this company might not make it. But we continued to invest in a company. And we started to see that D-Light and a few others were starting to spawn an off-grid solar energy revolution. And so we started to invest not only in solar home systems, but across an ecosystem, mini-grids and microgrids and nanogrids and back-end operating systems and financing systems. And today we've got a portfolio of about 40 or so companies across this growing and thriving off-grid energy system that has now brought clean light and electricity to more than 160 million low-income people. And that represents almost 1/3 of all people on the planet who have gotten access to light and electricity off-grid through off-grid solar since 2007. When you see that a group of entrepreneurs, companies, investors together can move the needle on a big issue, you start to, wow. Next slide, please. We're catching up. That's the portfolio. This is awesome. Next slide, please. I'm going to run and get my clicker. Thank you. When you start to see that you can move the needle, it gives you a real sense of confidence. Because now, we still have a big challenge in front of us. 800 million if we're going to reach SDG 7, and everybody talks about it, but what do we actually have to do to get there? Our belief is that 550 million people will gain access through the markets that have been developed. And a lot of the technologies in the markets will come out of Asia. But that leaves 250 million people that are the hardest to reach. If you look at this graph, I'm really glad this slide is here, you can actually see that bringing electricity to their people is one of Asia's great victories over the last 15 years. Not so much Africa. In fact, on the track the world is on, in 2030, 90% of all people who will not have electricity will live on the African continent, and that is very bad news. Because Africa is a continent of 1.3 billion people. The median age is 19.7. It is expected to double in population over the next 30 years. We are already seeing social unrest on a continent that is getting so hard hit with climate crisis. And so that problem is all of our problem. We are each other's destiny. And it doesn't matter where we are in the world, philanthropist, entrepreneur, social impact investor. This is also our problem. And we won't solve the 250 million with business as usual. We need philanthropy to continue to enable companies to go into the 23 hardest to reach countries in Africa to develop markets. Philanthropy, that's its role. Then we can build a facility that will bring in other kinds of capital through impact investing and concessionary debt and guarantees and first loss, where we need to start to see our impact investors take more risk, be more creative, because we can. The good news is we believe that 200 of those 250 million people can pay if they get access to affordable goods, electricity in that way. But as you can hear, building this over the last 15 years from all of these different individuals takes a lot of character, not just that moral imagination, but grit, courage, resilience, the ability to partner across lines of difference. These are not the skills I was taught as I was growing up, and certainly not in business school, where we were taught to lead specifically to enable us to maximize shareholder returns, where we put the shareholder and profit at the center, not to lead in ways that built systems with our humanity in the earth. So how do you do that? And can you actually teach character was a question that we asked. And can we go and find it as it's building so that we can build a pipeline of young entrepreneurs to solve some of our toughest problems? And we've been thinking about this for over a decade and investing in small ways in building up social innovators around the world. Today, Acumen Academy has an online platform where we've seen about 1 million people take courses, but so do we have a core of fellows, 40% of 1,000 fellows, 40% of whom are in Asia. And they're extraordinary. They're starting to show us what the next generation is capable of building if we give them the right kind of support. There are individuals like Sara Khurram, a Pakistani doctor who went into postpartum depression after her first child, when she understood that the expectation is that she would stop working. That was not her life plan. And so she also understood that 30% of all female doctors in Pakistan do stop working, despite Pakistan having a very low maternal mortality track record. And so she built a company called Sehat Kahani that would connect female doctors staying at home with rural women through telemedicine. And before the pandemic, she had built to 26 health clinics that were meeting with doctors on a regular basis. And she was building an app, but didn't believe that rural women would pay to just have a consultation on an app. But when lockdown happened on the first day, private clinics were shut down. And so Sara decided to make that app available and make it for free. And we and others could help give her the right kind of capital, which at this moment was grant funding, to let her go as fast as she could go. She then partnered with government in Pakistan, in Sindh. And the government gave her permission to enlist not only Pakistani doctors in the country, but those who'd been certified in a list of other countries. So that at the height of the pandemic, a woman in crisis in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the north of Pakistan speaking Pashtun could meet with a doctor speaking Pashtun in New York City and get herself safely to where she needed to be. Today, there are 9,000 doctors from around the world that are providing medical assistance to rural Pakistani women. Over 1 million have been served. And telehealth, with Sara as an advisor, is now part of the official Pakistani public health policy. Or Ankit Agarwal in India, who was sitting on the banks of the Ganges thinking about what success means when he saw this huge float of flowers coming down the river, looking beautiful but oozing cadmium, lead, arsenic, other chemicals from fertilizers. And he started to follow the thread of his curiosity to understand. And he ultimately built a company called Phool, which means flower in Sanskrit. And he decided to build a company based on the principles of the circular economy. Because what he learned was that every week, Indians bring 8 million metric tons of flowers to the temples as blessings for the gods. And then the priests at those temples don't want to desecrate the flowers by throwing them in the bin, so they throw them into the sacred rivers. Although those flowers in turn poison the rivers and the people who bathe in them. So Fool goes to the temples on a daily basis, collects the flowers, brings them to a factory where women who are from the scavenger caste, which is the lowest caste in India, it's a group that for many generations has been consigned to picking up human waste, are the ones that take the flowers, separate them, dry them, and convert them into inset sticks and vegan leather. And it's a beautiful company that is profitable and, dare I say, blossoming. And yet it was a story that took moral courage, moral leadership. Because when Ankit first started, and people found out who he was employing, he got kicked out of his first factory. All of the equipment destroyed. So he had to get a bus because the next factory was further away from where the women lived, and give people the dignity of going on buses so that they could get to the factory. And when you meet with these women, you really see what dignity looks like. As I said, when I look at so many of you who know the long loneliness, it's not enough for us to just be identifying extraordinary stories and helping individuals build their businesses and their nonprofit organizations, using them as role models. We need to build communities of leaders, and we need to build them specifically within nations and across nations, across race, class, ethnicity, tribe, caste, gender, so that they start to see themselves as one tribe united by a common set of shared values, and not the way that too many of us are being pushed by too many of our leaders. And so Academy now operates in 11 different regions. A couple of days ago, I had the great joy of meeting for the first time since the pandemic some of the 50 Malaysia fellows, which was so awesome because I'd never, Kathleen Chuwai Lin, who's just been an incredible anchor and is now an Acumen board member, is the one who built it. And I had never met these young individuals, but to see their joy, their vision for Malaysia, their willingness to have really hard conversations across the dividing lines in their nation, I could suddenly imagine 15, 20 years later, not just patient capital investing, but patient investing in our leaders, that they will be running corporations and civil society organizations, and they will be leading government ministries, but they will know their country in a different way than our leaders do now. And they will know each other and have a community of trust. And then you imagine that across the world. That's the dream. As I said, this work is hard. And it's not weeks or years hard, it's lifetimes hard. And so this sense of community and character is so critical, but so is having a moral compass. And we decided that we would actually write a manifesto for ourselves to try to give us a sense and a way of making decisions, particularly when we're holding opposing values in tension, which is so much at the heart of this work. If you'll indulge me, I'll read it. It starts by standing with the poor, listening to voices unheard and seeing potential where others see despair. It demands investing as a means, not as an end, daring to go where markets have failed and aid has fallen short. It makes capital work for us, not control us. It thrives on moral imagination, the humility to see the world as it is, the audacity to imagine what it could be. It's having the ambition to learn at the edge, the wisdom to admit failure, and the courage to start again. It requires patience and kindness, resilience and grit, a hard-edged hope. It's leadership that rejects bureaucracy, that rejects complacency, breaks through bureaucracy, challenges corruption, doing what's right, not what's easy. It's the radical idea of creating hope in a cynical world, changing the way the world tackles poverty, and building a world based on dignity. For us, it always comes back to dignity. This idea of choice, opportunity, the ability to be seen and to contribute. the great joy of my work is not only seeing our fellows and the entrepreneurs and the partners that make this work possible all over the world, but it's to go into the villages and the slums and to see the customers these entities serve. And I was in Rajasthan in India a number of years ago, and I had this great chance to sit with a group of women and ask them, as I often do, why did you buy these units? Why did you move from kerosene to solar? And the women were giving me all the answers that I was used to hearing. My children can read at night, I can stay up and talk to my friends at night, I feel safe, I can go to the toilet at night and not be worried. And then one of the women leaned forward and she said, I don't feel stressed. I said, really? Help me understand, what do you mean by that? And she said, when I had a kerosene lantern, I was always worried it might fall and hurt or burn or worse to one of my children. I said, well, that's really interesting. Because the young man who co-founded this company, Sam Goldman, was living in a West African village when his neighbor's kerosene lantern fell over and burned down the house and nearly killed his eldest child. And he decided right then and there that he was going to make it his life's work to eradicate kerosene. And now here I am in front of you, and you're holding a D-Light product. And she leaned toward me and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, please, madam, thank that young man for me. Imagine making something of use to someone across the world you might not know or meet. Imagine something of beauty. Imagine something that helps lift their sense of dignity. We so often focus on money, power, and fame when we look at who is successful. Our world would be so different if we defined it instead by the amount of energy we release into the world, by the amount of dignity, by the amount of beauty. So if I started with gratitude, let me end in love. Because this work is hard, because this work is long, it can only be done by those individuals who dare to believe that we are on this earth to serve each other, that we are not anything without each other, and that our dignity as a human race demands that each human being on this planet also live with dignity. So I wish each of you on your journeys gratitude, dignity, and most of all, love. Thank you. Thank you. No words. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for resetting the compass to move capital towards where there is need and not necessarily where it's safe, to building moral leadership and courage and cross-border communities of these moral leaders. The stories were personal and inspirational. The audience reaction, I think, said it all, that we started with gratitude and ending on a note of love. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Next up is our panel on strengthening mental health care across Asia, an area that has been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have an illustrious panel passionate about the issue to navigate this discussion for us. May I invite our moderator, Steve Lowe, Executive Director, Lien Center for Social Innovation, SMU. Our speakers, Richard Hawkes, Chief Executive, British Asian Trust. Neerja Birla, Founder and Chairperson, Aditya Birla Education Trust. Saban Malik, Managing Director, Johnson & Johnson Indonesia.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for gathering for this discussion over what I'm sure you would agree is an extremely pertinent topic of priority as we continue to strive toward the SDGs through venture philanthropy and other collaborative initiatives. I've personally been greatly enriched here in the last 2 days at AVPN at the extremely insightful presentations and candid discussions and views that I believe will most certainly propel us forward to our sustainable goals. I'd just like to say a special thanks also to the AVPN team who have produced a fantastic conference. Wouldn't you agree? As we look towards the SDGs, there's one key issue that some may argue that cuts across all 17 of the SDGs, which is the mental health and well-being of the very people we are all committed to help. To give a backdrop of today's discussion with our very esteemed panel, which we had a lovely breakfast with this morning, perhaps a look back to pre-pandemic 2015, if you can still remember, where mental health was included in the United Nations SDGs. In this historic step, the UN acknowledged the burden of disease of mental illness and defined mental health as a priority for global development for the next 15 years. In fact, the WHO noted in 2011 that in itself, mental health is a prerequisite for physical health and is strongly interlinked with other development factors such as poverty, work, and economic growth. Mental health also plays a key role in efforts to achieve social inclusion and equity, universal health coverage, access to justice and human rights, and sustained economic development. 7 years later, coming hot off the heels of a global pandemic, the issue of mental health has never been more relevant. Perhaps, if you would allow me some statistics to paint a context for our discussion, please allow me to quote some findings again from the UN. Persons with mental and psychosocial disabilities represent a significant proportion of the world's population. Millions of people worldwide have mental health conditions, and an estimated 1 in 4 people globally will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. Tragically, almost 1 million people die due to suicide every year, and it is the 3rd leading cause of death among young people. Depression is the leading cause of years lost due to disability worldwide. Mental health problems, including alcohol abuse, are among the 10 leading causes of disability in both developed as well as developing countries. In particular, depression is ranked 3rd in the global burden of disease and is projected to rank 1st in 2030. Poor mental health, as you know, is both a cause and consequence of poverty, compromised education, gender inequality, ill health, violence, and other global challenges. It impedes the individual's capacity to work productively, realize their potential, and to make a contribution to their community. Now, we are so glad to know that there is a growing recognition with the international community that invisible disabilities, such as mental health, is one of the most neglected yet essential development issues in achieving internationally agreed development goals. With that, I'm very privileged to facilitate a discussion with some individuals that have made great strides in this area. And perhaps we can start our discussion today by talking with Dr. Nirja. What are some of the issues that need to be addressed, and what are some of the issues that you have addressed in your work?
So, good morning, and thank you so much, Steve, and thank you so much to AVPN, and congratulations for a very successful conference. I'm particularly very happy that you've organized this plenary centered around mental health, because I think it's, from all the statistics that you've just heard from Steve, I think it's really, it's time that mental health did get center stage focus. So I'm really glad that this, we've got this opportunity to actually talk about it. So I think We launched Empower, which is a social enterprise, about 6 years ago. We're trying to be, very vocal and creating awareness about mental health, its concerns, and really alleviate the stigma around it. As we all know that the taboo around the subject is so deep-rooted and so deep-seated that because of lack of awareness and also because of the unwillingness to accept that you could be having an issue, a lot of people don't want to seek help. As a result of which people are just suffering in silence. They'd rather do that. Obviously, the quality of life really deteriorates, productivity comes down, and in, of course, really bad worst-case scenarios, there is death by suicide. So these are the areas that we're really trying to focus on and support mental health, make mental health care more accessible, make treatment more accessible, bridge the treatment gap, and really try to create a lot of awareness and dialogue around mental health.
It's so important to be able to even talk about it, and therefore one of the foundational strategies is to attempt to remove the stigma around the discussion on mental health.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Mr. Richard Hawkes, Chief Executive of the British Asian Trust, it's become a key priority in the area of mental health in the communities that you work in.
So thank you very much, Steve. And let me just reiterate what Nirja said, and congratulations to AVPN for having a session on mental health and having a plenary session. I think we all know it's an increasingly important issue to be talking about. But very often conferences avoid addressing the subject and certainly not making it centre stage. I think many of you might know the British Asian Trust works across South Asia. We do a lot of programs in social finance, in education, livelihoods, child protection. But one of the programs that I'm most proud of is for the last 10 years, we've been working in mental health. Mainly in Pakistan was our first mental health program, but I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. I just want to reiterate some of the points that Steve made. Without question, there is a mental health crisis at the moment. There was already a mental health crisis before COVID, but since COVID has happened, it has absolutely exacerbated that situation for millions of people around the world. As Steve said, the World Health Organization says that 1 in 4 people will be affected by a mental health issue at some stage in their life. So for us, in a country like Pakistan, which has a population of over 200 million, that's more than 50 million people. In Indonesia, with 270 million people, that's 70 million. If you look across the whole of Asia, with 4.5 billion, that's more than 1 billion people who will be affected with some form of mental health issue at some stage in their life. And we know, the evidence and the facts show that mental health issues can lead to serious illness, hospitalization, disability, as you said, to family breakdown, to suicide. And we heard the stats that Steve said. But how is the world responding to that? It's just not doing enough. If you look at 2% of global health budgets, so of the health budgets, only 2% goes towards mental health. If you look at philanthropy, of all of the philanthropic money that goes into health, less than 0.5% goes to mental health. And the bottom line is that a lot of the issues that we've highlighted can be prevented. If you invest in prevention and raise awareness, you can prevent people going into more serious decline, going into hospital, going into the situations where they might commit suicide and so on. We believe at the British Asian Trust that you've got to have a holistic, strategic approach to this overall. Yes, there needs to be more services, and yes, there need to be more professionals. If you look at Pakistan, for example, there are only 400 psychiatrists in the whole country, meaning that that's a ratio of 1 to 125,000 people. So clearly you need more psychiatrists, clearly you need more psychologists. But at the same time, you need more awareness raising. You need to, as Nirja said, you need to address the stigma. You need to get people talking about these issues. It's an absolute fact that there are a lot of people that have what we would call low levels of mental health issues, whether that's low-level depression, anxiety, that can be prevented from getting worse if people can be more open about it. We've learnt a lot from campaigns in the UK, where celebrities, some of our sports stars in the UK, some of the royal family, they talk openly about mental health issues, and it starts to normalise it. And in our work in Pakistan, we've tried to replicate that. So we actually have a big partnership with the organisation that Jacqueline talked about earlier, which is a really innovative social enterprise in Pakistan. And we've added a mental health dimension to what that organisation does. But one of the partnerships I'm most proud of is our partnership with the Pakistan cricket team. And so we have this partnership with the Pakistan cricket team whereby the superstars, and anyone who knows South Asia know how massive cricket is, the superstar cricket players talk openly about mental health. They talk about mental health. It normalises it. We've got a partnership with the Pakistan Business Council, where businesses are starting to get more companies and people within those companies talking about mental health. And so, yes, we support organisations to develop more services, but we also raise awareness, address the stigma, bring coalitions together in cross-sectoral partnerships so that then they can advocate for more funding from government and so on. And I think you need all of those things collectively to address this issue.
Thank you so much, Richard. So powerful when we see role models, celebrities, leaders of industry being vulnerable and even humble to admit that they too struggle with mental health issues. It really brings the issue to the forefront of conversation. I'd like to ask Mr. Sawan Malik, MD for Johnson & Johnson Indonesia, some of the very exciting things that Johnson & Johnson are doing to address some of the mental health struggles.
Thank you, Steve, and glad to be here. In the morning, though, I did get a few curious looks from our panelists and some of our friends. Hey, what does Johnson & Johnson do in the area of mental health? And I think it's a fair question. Johnson & Johnson is more known across the world, and mainly in Asia, for its baby products, for Listerine, etc., the consumer health products. They're more front-facing. People know about that. But people don't know that we have a large and thriving pharmaceutical business, and we do a lot of work, and especially in the foundation side of it, where we are knowledge partners to AVPN, and a lot of other work which goes on. So I will shed a little bit of light on that part of the work which Johnson & Johnson does. But before I go into that, in the previous session, the Acumen, the founder, she put up the manifesto which she had written. It was really inspiring to read that manifesto. If you have time today, go on to the Johnson & Johnson website, and you will see a document called the Credo. That's the purpose of the company. That's something which we live by every day. And that's also an equally written from the heart by the founder in the 1940s, a very simple document which states what does the company stand for. And one of the paragraphs in that is about, we serve the communities in which we live in, and we do everything possible to improve the state of mental health and access for all the, the people we interact with. Now, coming back to the mental health and what all we have done. Since the 1950s, we have launched 20 different medications for nervous system disorders. We have 3 of those on the World Health Organization Essential Health List. In 2019, we were the only, after 30 years, a new mechanism of action for depression was launched, which was after 30 years any company had done any work on that. We also have every iteration of the medicine becomes better than the previous one. If you go back years, then some medication for depression, a patient would have had to take maybe, 3 times a day. Then we improved it to maybe once a week. Then we further improved it, that you just need to take it once a month. We have gone to a stage where a few years back, we launched a long-acting injectable wherein you just need to take it once, and the patient does not need to come to the caregiver for the next 3 months. In fact, just last year, we put in an application with the FDA where once in 6 months, an injection, and the person does not need to come to the health center or the caregiver. Now, the numbers which Richard quoted before, and the amount of people who have this suffer from mental health issues. Imagine if a medication or drug could come which just needed once in 6 months or once in a year, and then you are a productive member of the society. And that can release so much capacity in the healthcare system, and the same resources we can treat a lot many people. So those are some of the things that we do on the drug and development side to make it easy, or make it easy for people to deliver those drugs and for patients' outcomes to be much better. We also do a lot of work on the research and research side with the governments, with the Singapore government, with KPMG. We launched a white paper which talked about what is it that we need from a policy standpoint and what is the collaboration that we need with governments so that all the drugs and the medication that is being developed, the training of the cadres that is being developed, how do we spread it out, and what help, without the help of the government, such large numbers cannot be tackled. So that's another part of the aspect of the work that we do. Take out policy recommendations, work with the government, and see what impact we can make for this disease, which is widely prevalent in this world, and how we take control of it. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you very much for that, Sawan. It warmed my heart to have met a Johnson & Johnson team in the very rural heart of South Sumatra, and they were doing education and uplifting of the local doctors, increasing their awareness on issues such as mental health. So thank you for the good work that you do. I'd like to direct my next question to Dr. Nirja. And with your extensive work in some of the more vulnerable communities, how have you seen the state of mental health be affected, specifically with COVID-19 in the recent years?
So as we all know, the pandemic, the COVID itself, and then the lockdown that followed, obviously has left a huge mark on all our mental health. And I think initially when it struck, I think there was a lot of fear of the unknown, a lot of anxiety around it. And as we progressed into the COVID, we saw a whole plethora of mental health concerns coming up. So at that point, we launched a helpline actually, Empower 10111, which is a 24/7 helpline. It's a toll-free number. And that was the first thing that we did during COVID. And we realized that a lot of callers, and believe it or not, 65% of them being males, expressed a lot of anxiety and fear of the unknown, along with a lot of depressive disorders because of loss of careers, loss of loved ones, loss of businesses, sudden change of plans. So we saw a lot of that coming up. Then we also saw a lot of people calling up, just distress calls coming up because they were just lonely. They were separated from their families, isolated. So we heard a lot of that coming up. And as COVID and the pandemic progressed, then during the second phase, we saw a lot of callers coming in with grief because people had started losing lives. There was just a whole state of languishing that was happening, and people were just people were feeling very remorseful and a lot of grief because of so much of loss of life just around them. We were either hearing somebody whom you knew had passed on, or somebody, a close relative had passed on. So there was a lot of grief that we saw. So that was with the helpline. Then we also ran a lot of support groups for people suffering from grief. That was quite successful in that sense because we had initially when we rolled it out, we had about 30 support groups that were running simultaneously, and each of them had about 50 to 60 people. So that was an effort that we did during COVID. Also, we did a lot of work with the frontline workers, with the local municipal corporation people, as well as the police, especially with those who were affected with COVID themselves and had to be in isolation. So we started working a lot with them. We started making a lot of outbound calls to people and their families, and we saw a lot of stress because of overburden, burnout, and again, a lot of isolation that was coming in. What we also saw was that a lot of domestic violence started coming about, interpersonal relationships, and we saw that with a lot of children because we were also working with children from remand homes, from children who needed special care. We were working with women from destitute families, and we saw a lot of domestic violence and interpersonal issues with interpersonal relationships coming about. So I think the silver lining during the pandemic was that it brought out mental health and the importance of mental health into sharper focus. We're still seeing effects of it, and across ages and across different communities. So, we're really working a lot towards that still. Of course, one of the biggest challenges was the fact that remote areas were very difficult to get to. So we sort of went on to the technology and went on to using the online mode. So that was very helpful then.
And perhaps the only silver lining we might talk about in this very tragic backdrop is the opportunity now to bring mental health to the forefront, because the pandemic has in some ways exacerbated the problem, but also bring it to the forefront. And with that, I'd like to direct my question to Mr. Richard Hawkes. What role do you think social investors have to play, and how can they deploy their capital most effectively across sectors in these communities?
So I think there's a huge role for social investors, for philanthropy, to do what social investors and philanthropists have always done, which is take risks, do things differently, innovate, be creative. There are some huge challenges that have to be overcome. So, and if you just look at those challenges first, the stigma that we talked about, people just won't talk about mental health. So sometimes it's difficult to work out where it is, who's got it, how you're dealing with it, and so on. Most people, if they get any other kind of illness, are quite happy to be open and admit it. People, if anybody breaks a leg, they don't try and hide it, there's no shame. But when people suffer from a mental health issue, it's not seen as being an illness. There's stigma attached to it, there's taboo attached to it, there's weakness attached to it, and so on. So it can be very challenging to find out and work out exactly what who you're trying to support. Another big challenge is that at this conference, a lot of people quite rightly talk about what are the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve? How do you measure those outcomes? How do you then invest in achieving those outcomes? When you're dealing with an issue like mental health, it's very difficult to be really clear about the outcomes and measurable outcomes. If you're trying to drive social change or attitudinal change, or you're running a prevention campaign, that can be really difficult. So in that area, we need social investors, philanthropists to be thinking differently about the kind of ways that the investments are going to be measured and success is going to be measured. Mental health, for some reason, is often not seen as a development issue. As you said, Steve, it cuts across all of the SDGs. It's a cause and the consequence of poverty. It is a huge development issue, but a lot of development funding doesn't go to mental health. We've already mentioned, a lot of government funding doesn't. And so these are the areas where I think social investors, philanthropists need to be thinking differently, to recognise that if we don't do something about this, the consequences are going to be absolutely huge. Every year, it's estimated that 10 billion working days are lost because of mental health issues. 10 billion working days lost. And so there are ways of starting to measure the success of preventing these things happening. And so I think we need to be creative, we need to be innovative, we need to be working together, we need cross-sectoral partnerships, we need government working with the private sector, working with the not-for-profit sector, and we need to then be creative about the way that capital is deployed, whether it's traditional philanthropy, whether we're looking at creative, innovative finance measures, whether we look at pooled finance, all of those things. But it needs the social investors to step forward and be creative and innovative and recognise the longer-term consequences of not doing something, which make doing something now an absolute imperative.
It's so important for us as funders and philanthropists also to think through and to take some risks in this area, which may not be a traditional place to fund. I think even in Singapore, the National Council of Social Service, through the government, of course, started a very strong campaign called Beyond the Label, just to bring that conversation forward. And it's an encouragement for us to, in our plans, in our programs, in our strategies, to include that as an element of how we would like to see outcomes in any project that we do.
But can I just add on that? Those kinds of initiatives and campaigns are absolutely essential. And it's like the thing I was talking about when we get famous cricket players to be doing things. But it's very difficult to get those kinds of initiatives funded. So the campaign that you've just talked about in Singapore, you were saying earlier, it's had tremendous successes, but some of those successes are difficult to measure and it's difficult to get funding in. So that's where we need brave, innovative social investors, philanthropists to understand that there are different things to fund that can lead to those sort of successful outcomes.
Certainly, certainly. And Mr. Sawan Malik, perhaps some input from yourself on how corporations have a role to play in the awareness of mental health and even addressing some of the issues, either at the workplace or in the communities and markets that they serve.
Thanks, Steve. But really important discussion, the previous one, with people really coming out and talking about it. And I think I would like to add that, just a few months back, I read in the newspaper about one of my favorite actresses back home in India, and she came out saying that she had a mental health issue, and I was quite surprised. But but the amount of coverage it got, the media attention that it got, and therefore the government attention to do things suddenly is 10-folds, or in fact even 100-folds. So I think that point was really well made, and that's something we really need across places, that we remove that label and more people come out and talk about it. But yeah, coming back to what we do as a corporate, I think we bring our global scale to a problem of this magnitude, and I think that helps a lot. We connect the dots across various places. So we work with a lot of governments. In 2018, we started a 5-year project with the government of Rwanda, with the Ministry of Health there, and that's the most vulnerable and underserved community. And in that 5-year project, we had certain goals, and one is obviously working directly and helping the people there, but at the same time, and more importantly, taking the learnings out of there and seeing what all we can apply to different parts of the globe. We do a lot of work across Asia. In East Java, we have working with the Lentera of LKNU, where we train cadres to talk about exactly the point of stigma, and train people to say that, hey, this is not a stigma, it's just an illness, and it can get cured with proper models of care, etc. We work with Project Hope, Yayasan Project Hope for maternal health. And during the last couple of years, this issue of mental health also came to the forefront because of a lot of our healthcare workers who really went through a very tough time. We all were working from home, but they had 2 years in which they were day in and day out working and taking care of the patients, and a lot of them suffered from some of these issues. So across Southeast Asia, we worked with a lot of partners, collaborating with them to help what we can alleviate the condition of our frontline healthcare workers. So basic needs Vietnam, with the Vietnamese organization, with PMHA, which is the Philippines Mental Health Association for the frontline workers. So we work with these organizations, we learn what they do, we help with our scale, we connect the dots from various places, and then see how we can further take it forward and improve models of care, improve overall diagnosis, treatment, etc. At a small scale, even in our own corporate, and we have also spread this message to other corporates, we have what we call the Employee Assistance Program, and anyone who feels that needs some help, without anyone knowing, they can connect with this helpline, and they have the best psychiatrists in the world helping them out. It's just a private consultation between the employee and that person, and then it gets mapped out as to how what else help can be provided, and no one else in the company knows about it. And that's we found that a lot of people started using it over years. If you go back 4 or 5 years back, hardly anyone would use it. And right now, my last statistics on that was 7% of my Indonesian workforce use that helpline. So it's really good to see that over a period of time, things are progressing, and people are coming out and saying that, hey, we need help, and these professionals can help us out and improve some of these things. So that's at a small scale, but corporate-wide. And then we, of course, as I spoke about, the larger scale things that we do, and connect the dots across places, and see what are the best things that can be done, and apply them in the other parts of the world.
And such amazing work that Johnson & Johnson is doing, not just on the community front, but also with the healthcare workers, your own employees, and certainly modeling for us how corporations may address this issue. Perhaps I'd like to open the floor, and we've heard some of the challenges, the struggles, and the need for awareness. Perhaps tell us some good news. Tell us some programs that you've initiated or are running, and some of the people that have been helped. Perhaps, Dr. Nirja, you're very much on the ground with your communities that you work with. Tell us some stories that have helped individuals out of their mental health struggles.
So I think clearly the
couple of big challenges that we face in our work is the lack of awareness, which comes from two areas. One is that you're genuinely not aware of what is mental health, or what are the mental health concerns, or what are the different kind of illnesses that can happen. So typically, somebody would be, say, feeling anxious, but because you just become so used to feeling anxious, you don't realize that it could actually be an illness. You just kind of think it's a daily part of your living, and therefore you don't act on it. So that is a lack of awareness. And then there is one whole bit where people are aware, educated people who are well exposed, well aware, but they don't want to accept it, which then comes from stigma and the taboo, because you very often don't want to seek professional help because a psychiatrist is almost like a taboo word. You don't say you're going to a psychiatrist, so you don't accept it. But I think when, the kind of campaigns that we've done, we've allied with Bollywood celebrities, for example, or we've had some very nice social media campaigns, we've had music festivals, we've come out with a song with a very well-known Bollywood singer. So I think things like that have helped people come out of their shell and talk about it. Because in my experience, like over the last couple of years, people do come up and tell me that, because of something that they've read or heard about Empower or the work that we're doing, or people have come out with stories, it's encouraged them also to come out with theirs and to go and seek help. So that has been a very big, that's been a very big advantage for us, where the awareness that we're trying to create is actually helping people to come out and feel that they are not alone and they can come up and speak about it. The other very big challenge, of course, that we face is that people don't assign enough value to mental health. You don't give it enough priority. You always feel it's always on the back burner. You always feel that, it's something that you're going to deal with and it's going to become all right. So I think once we start assigning more value to it and we make it a priority, I think that will help. So for example, we've started at the district level, we've started a district rural health program in collaboration with the state government. And the minister himself talking about it has really helped, because it's encouraged, again, people, it's encouraged the help-seeking behavior. So you have more people actually going to the rural district hospital for counseling, for psychiatry. We also run a preventive program, so we do screening camps. So things like that have also helped people actually come out and seek help for it. So I think in different pockets, the kind of work that we're seeing people wanting to talk about it and seek the professional help that they should be seeking.
It's fundamental, isn't it? If they can't talk about it, we can't deal with it. And if a society tries to hide it under a carpet, it only exacerbates the problem. And perhaps, Richard, you were telling me earlier some really successful campaigns with the British Asian Trust and other initiatives in the United Kingdom, as well as in the communities that you work with. Perhaps tell us a little bit more about that.
So we've been really proud of some of the different achievements that we've had over the years, because I think when we started working in mental health 10 years ago, there just weren't many people doing that. And I think some of those successes have included getting some of those big superstars to be talking out about things. We ran a program in Bangladesh in the Rohingya camps, supporting children with psychosocial support. We've got a big program that we've just started in the ready-made garment industry in Bangladesh, supporting mainly women workers in those factories. We're starting to build in a mental health component to our India recovery work that we're doing. And we just need to find more people like Nirja that are, really pioneering, and because unfortunately in India there's just not a huge amount happening where there's a lot that needs to be happening. In Pakistan, like I say, we've been working there a lot longer, so we've been doing national advocacy, so putting together a coalition of Pakistani organisations to advocate for more recognition for mental health from government and to advocate for more funding. And I think there what's really important is the role of an international organisation is not to go in and do advocacy in country. It's to enable and facilitate organisations within the country to do it. I think it's brilliant when you hear the examples of Johnson & Johnson, both in terms of the work that they're actually doing, but also what you said that you've set up within the company. And we've got a program with the Pakistan Business Council I mentioned earlier, where it's doing exactly that. It's getting the businesses in Pakistan to be setting up programs within the businesses to support colleagues, to support staff. I mean, you go back to that 10 billion working days a year lost, or 1 in 4 people. You look, at this conference, there's over 1,000 people. That means potentially 250 people at this conference at some point in their life, but we don't talk about it. And so I think a lot of our big successes have been when we've stimulated those conversations and when you can start to prevent people sinking into a crisis.
Thank you very much. And at Johnson & Johnson, I'm very curious to know when it made mental health a priority, what was the initial reaction perhaps from board stakeholders, customers even, as you ventured into this frontier, if you like?
I think it was, it was probably welcomed. And as I said, our manifesto or our credo speaks about, serving the communities we live in. And that was written by Robert Wood Johnson in 1940. And I think, so I would think that our commitment to the drug discovery, development is massive towards mental health. And I told you about the number of, the iteration of drugs that are coming forth, and the new ones which are really good in terms of the timelines, etc. And we continue our commitment towards that and make sure that we will invest in that direction. That's one side, which is the drug development side. But I think the other side we are really proud of is the amount of work we do with the governments, because we can't do this alone. And governments, trusts, and everyone has to be in this together. And I can see that governments across the world are listening. Even in Indonesia, for example, the government took out the mental health law in 2014. And there's a lot of work going on in that direction. They have even implemented some of the policies and recommendations into the medical school's curriculum. So if it starts from there, it'll go all the way. I was with one of the MOH members a year or so back, and I was really happy to see the amount of work they're doing in the tertiary healthcare centers, which are called DENKES here, where each of the doctors is being trained to identify mental health problems and what are the right drugs to be given to prevent or cure those. And we then work with the government to see amongst those 6,000 centers, where are the hotspots, or where are the places where your doctors and nurses are most overloaded and need the most training. So we also don't have infinite resources that we can go everywhere. So we work with them to see, okay, these are the 10, 20 or 30 centers we will help you with in the next 3 months, and then the next 30 in the next 3 months, etc. So I think that is, from an opportunity standpoint, I see a lot of welcoming from various governments across the world on this aspect, as they also realize the amount of economic loss that happens because a person is not productive in the society. Now, of course, there are also challenges in the sense that, if the budgets get cut, unfortunately, it is sometimes those are the budgets that get cut fast. But hopefully, I think with the COVID situation, this topic has again come to the forefront, and hopefully that will, give it a ballast for the next few years. Another, I think, really the big opportunity or the thing which gladdens my heart is all the telehealth which is happening across the country, and partners like HelloDoc, etc., do a lot of work there. In this country, Indonesia, we have most of the doctors in maybe Java and Sumatra Island, but the patients are across the world, and therefore the telehealth is able to connect those few doctors to all the patients who need it wherever in the country they might be. And that's also quite amazing, and an outcome of the last 2 years of acceleration of the digital aspect of mental health which is there. So I think those are some of the things which give us hope that at some point in time we will get the better of this, and more people will come out. Drugs will be better, and governments will help us. Stakeholders will all be connected, and the future will be brighter.
So powerful when corporations are committed to something like this. They're able to scale and incorporate it into their everyday business. And as our time comes to an end, perhaps just want to thank the panel for their great insights and the great work that you are doing and will be doing, and yet so much more work to be done from all of us here. And perhaps I would like to summarize our discussion to 3 C's, if you like, for today. And the first one is care, and how we as philanthropists, program managers, stakeholders care not just for the program or the outcomes, but for the individuals that we are trying to serve, having that understanding of the intrinsic value in each of them, as well as what drives them and what they struggle with in order to reach the SDGs. We can't ignore that. The other one I would say is courage. Courage to make this very much part of the forefront of any program that we run. While it may not be well-funded or a very popular topic to discuss or even put in a proposal, we open our minds to say, we will take that risk, that this needs to be a place where there has to be resources and an emphasis, because it does cut across every aspect of our lives and every development goal that we talk about. And the third one, I would be really inspired actually from listening to you all, is the word creativity. Of so many ways we can help in this area of mental health, whether it's helplines, whether it's in everyday business, whether it's getting celebrities and even the royal family to talk about it. That's something that we can certainly look at as we address this very important issue on the mental health of the communities that we are trying to help. Thank you all very much for this very insightful time. I'm sure you all agree that was very interesting and inspiring for all of us. So I want to thank our panel, and I'll conclude this time.
Thank you, dear panelists. You have reflected back to our audience the very real, stark, and tragic picture of the state of mental health affairs, but also have given an impetus and possibly drawn a silver lining of hope of what the social investment community can do through non-traditional choice of investment areas, and urging us to be brave, innovative, and creative in this, through the stories that you've shared of early successes in moving the needle. So care, courage, and creativity towards better mental health. So thank you so much. And moving on to our next segment, I now have the pleasure of inviting Managing Director Yayasan Hassana to talk us through accelerating change through innovative partnership models. Through the pandemic, she was able to forge successful partnerships and collaboration models. Under her leadership, Hassana has assisted more than 1 million lives in Malaysia and galvanized many multi-stakeholder social projects in the country under public, private, people partnership models. But in her words, where there was difficulty, there was also tremendous fortitude. May I call on to stage Yangbur Bahagia, Dato Shahira Ahmed Bazari. Before I hand it to Shahira, she first has a brief video to share with us.
Kebanyakannya orang ni, kami sejak tidak ada dalam pendidikan. Mereka ni orang tiada identiti. Kan? Untuk membuktikan identiti nama mereka sendiri pun mereka susah untuk membuktikan. So, kalau kami tidak ada surat kan macam dianggap warga asing. Kan? Saya 18 tahun, saya tinggal di Pulau Madal. Saya Mastal Ariki di sini. Mastal Ariki itu maksudnya cikgu kecil. Saya start belajar dari 2015, sampai sekarang lah. Dulu saya belajar, alhamdulillah sekarang saya mengajar.
Okay, school mula ditubuhkan pada tahun 2015 daripada kesedaran bahawa terdapat ramai anak-anak yang tidak diiktiraf oleh mana-mana negara, menyebabkan mereka tidak mempunyai akses kepada hak-hak asasi seperti kesihatan, pendidikan, kebajikan dan lain-lain lagi lah.
Aku mengajar di sini bahasa Melayu dan miti-miti. Kami mengajar juga mereka ini berus gigi cara yang betul dan pakai sabun yang betul. Tentang kebersihan lah. Dulu kami sebenarnya belajar di luar.
Kita mula dengan itulah, mengajar di siling-siling jambatan, menumpang rumah orang, di balai raya, bawah pokok.
Panas apa semua, kami tetap belajar.
Kita dapat menyediakan nutrisi kepada pelajar-pelajar kami. Dengan bantuan dana Yayasan Hasanah, kita dapat menyediakan nutrisi. Air bersih pula pun bermula dengan dana Yayasan Hasanah. 30 pelajar masa itu kita sediakan tangki air kepada mereka dan mereka dapat akses kepada air bersih. Dan alhamdulillah selepas tu kita dapat lagi beberapa orang berminat untuk membantu. Bermula dengan Yayasan Hasanah. Dulu tidak ada orang percaya.
Sebenarnya harapan saya tiada lagi anak-anak tercicir dalam pendidikan. Itu harapan saya.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Let me begin. This is not my original voice. I hope to power through for the next 15 minutes. Please bear with me. Got back up. Okay. Thank you, Lavanya, for the introduction. I'm most delighted to be here to share some of my thoughts on a subject that I'm very passionate about in strategic philanthropy, and that is on connecting the dots, coordination, and collaboration in the social impact sector. Thank you, AVPN, for giving me this opportunity to share Yayasan Hasanah's own journey in this space. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, on the list of things that make a great nation, the strength of its people ranks highly, if not in the top spot. The last 2 years were challenging, as we all know, reeling from 2 years of pandemic, coping with economic challenges, as well as for many, a triple whammy through climate challenges and natural disasters to boot. As we worked with individuals, families, our civil society partners, and even within our organization itself, we saw a pattern emerge, and that is where there was difficulty, there was immense fortitude. For Hasanah, 2021 was a year that Reflect Malaysia cekal mengharungi cabaran. We saw this not only amongst our partners and communities, but also among our own staff and the general philanthropic sector, and I'm sure you all can relate as you too reflect on the year that was. I would like to begin by telling you 3 short stories of individuals who prevailed and demonstrated positive attitude and strength in adversity. Meet Katna, the lady on your left, right? Who lost all hope when her husband, the sole breadwinner, lost his job during the pandemic. But with all of these stories, we saw heroism. Katna, through our skills program, used her creative sewing skills to earn enough income to take care of her family and weather the pandemic, while at the same time helping turtle conservation programs within her community. Teacher Yuan in the middle, we spoke about mental health earlier. He's a teacher from a secondary school in Sarawak. The stats in Malaysia with students between 5 to 15 years old, 12.1% of children in Malaysia suffer from some kind of mental health situation in Malaysia. So Teacher Yuan is one of our heroes, a mental health frontliner to all his students. Over the years, we have trained more than 1,000 school counselors around the country to be mental health frontliners in our schools. And I'm also happy to share that as part of our education sub-objectives, mental health is a very key initiative that we're going to run targeting kids between 10 to 18 years old, essentially the K-12. And the intention is that they get awareness of what is it that they're experiencing early on in life, so they know how to deal and manage with that, and also support them not just through their school counselors, but also people across the line for them to call someone if they need to speak with. And the final story is School Omadal. You saw the video. I think the story there, that community is actually a stateless community in Sabah. And government policies do not support refugees and stateless communities. So I think that story was about the power of collaboration, because last year, even through government funding, because our policy, of course, aid does not discriminate, allows us to support any people in need, we were able to provide that assistance to the Bajau Laut community in Sabah. These stories are just a glimpse of many people assisted in 2021 through 169 projects and 220 partners. Ladies and gentlemen, for some context, as I share some numbers, Malaysia is a country with approximately 33.8 million people, about the population size of Greater Jakarta. From 2015 to 2020, Hasanah distributed about 1.2 billion ringgit, which is approximately $300 million, I think, impacted over 2.2 million people and worked with 365 civil society partners. But in 2021 alone, through the power of partnerships and collaboration, we could reach more people in need like Katna, Teacher Yuan, and the e-school undocumented children. In 2021 alone, we managed more than 50% of additional partners and programs that in the last 5 years. The number of people we reached represented 66% of total amount since 2015, and the amounts of fund managed, partners involved, and projects overseen made up almost half of the cumulative figures measured since inception. So how did we do that? This is the power of we, the partnership and collaboration models that allows us to assist more people in need in an expedient and efficient way. And this is what I hope to share with you today. But just before that, a little bit about the foundation. We are a grant maker, the foundation of Khazanah Nasional, the sovereign fund of Malaysia, incorporated on 1st of July as an independent grant-making foundation. In Arabic, Hasanah means goodness or doing good. And despite our primary grant-making role, we believe in going beyond dollars and cents by working towards the bigger picture of facilitating an entire ecosystem of transformation. Our work focuses on 5 impact areas, and they are education, community development, environment, arts and public spaces, as well as knowledge, through which we aim to be a convener, a collaborator, and a catalyst for change. So what happened in 2020 and 2021 that catapulted our transition from a purely self-funded grant maker through our endowment to one that accelerated our scale and impact through third-party funds? In a panel yesterday, I think Claire from AVPN spoke about working with government and how the trust capital was tremendously breached during the pandemic between government, private sector, and particularly civil societies. This is exactly what we witnessed in Malaysia. There are always silver linings to adversity and challenges, as they say. And as we all witnessed, a few good things did happen resulting from the lockdown and the pandemic. Due to the immense pressure and societal needs that tested national protection systems all around the world, saw the mushrooming of innovative models. Necessity is the mother of all inventions, as they say. So some of our successful coordination and collaboration models are demonstrated here. This is a significant collaboration model last year was the effort of government-linked companies' disaster response network, which was transformational in coordinating acute response to public hospitals and families during the pandemic. And 39 companies came together in April 2020 because we all know what happened in March, and everybody wanted to help. Nobody knew what to do because everyone was dealing with the pandemic for the first time. There were shortages of PPE. Everyone was trying to get ventilators, if you remember. And private companies were like, how can we help? So, so we managed to coordinate the response directly through the Ministry of Health. And like I said, 39 companies raised a total of 207 million ringgit and coordinated response that benefited about 60 public hospitals in Malaysia. We also had the pilot initiative Cerdik that saw 32 corporations coming together to contribute more than 150,000 devices and data connectivity to enable students from low-income households to participate on online learning. For perspective, we've got 10,100 schools in Malaysia, more than about 4.9 million students, so 150 drop in the ocean. But this was a private-led initiative to demonstrate an effective way of enabling access to online learning for government to replicate and continue and carry on. So Yayasan Hasanah was the secretariat coordinating both initiatives. Another recognition last year was from the Ministry of Finance, who entrusted Yayasan Hasanah to deliver a wide range of social impact programs and immediate aid through the various COVID and economic stimulus packages and Budget 2022 allocations, which enabled us to reach a record-breaking number of 1.48 million people in 2021. So let me just share and reflect on some learnings. As we continued to receive requests for coordination and fund management during the crisis, it was evident that this was anchored on several fundamental prerequisites and key foundations that enabled us to do this. First, having a robust governance and accountability system in place. Our governance structures, audit and impact measurement processes are transparent, stable, and technically sound. At the same time, we ensured and established some ground rules and governance structures within the partnership to enable smooth decision-making, clarifying the role and scope of each stakeholder, internal and external, in the process from the onset. Second, good trust capital, built over the years with private, public, and civil society actors. One of the core reasons why partnerships are entered into, we've heard the word trust a lot in this conference, because of the trust we place between organizations in delivering common goals. While Hasanah seemed attractive for partnership because we occupy a sweet spot between public, private, and non-profit spaces, still trust built over the years is key. At the same time, we were cognizant to align the objectives of the partnership, identify challenges and risks, and establish an ongoing process that were key to sustaining long-term trust. Third, authentic and deep grassroots experience and understanding. While partnership requests and resources may emerge top-down, partnerships that thrive are locally driven, bottom-up, and rooted in a thorough understanding of the issue at hand, and thereby seeking cooperation and coordination by several stakeholders. I cannot overstate the importance of engaging with the community for solutions that will matter to them, be owned and sustained by them. Fourth, an agile organization. This was a key reflection for us as well, with high-performing talent pool and supportive board. Forging and maintaining partnerships is hard work. It is equally important to rally the support of your board on strategic questions while putting together the right team that will bring the moving pieces together. Finally, while letting the goals of the partnership drive the agenda, partnerships need a dynamic, agile, and enabling environment. Fifth, collaboration of any kind can be adopted that is aligned to your own organizational theory of change and impact targets. We were quite particular about this, that we manage projects that are aligned to our focus areas and mindful of scope creep within the organization, or doing courses that we have no knowledge or expertise in. The 5 prerequisites: robust governance and accountability structure, trust capital, deep and authentic grassroots experience and understanding, an agile organization with a supportive board, and alignment of your own organizational expertise and theory of change, for us was a reflection as important win-win-win partnership and impact for all parties. Being the national foundation in Malaysia, there are high expectations for Yayasan Hasanah to lead social change in the country and bring together diverse stakeholders to weave a collective and stronger advocacy agenda. This requires us to build and nurture multi-stakeholder partnerships and multi-sector partnerships. However, what must be remembered is that irrespective of the nature of collaboration, be it with government, corporates, the premise of any collaboration is to amplify and deepen reach and impact using the collective voice. The pathways and nature of social issues may differ, but the intention and end goal should be the point of convergence. It is important as well as I reflect 3 key behaviors that enable high-trust partnerships, and these are, first, pre-aligning objectives and managing expectations. Sounds natural, but not easy. A critical learning has been that it is often important to have frank conversations about the goals of each party for the collaboration. It is not prudent to assume that just because everyone is seated at the same table and asks the asks and expectations from collaboration would be naturally aligned. In many cases, we spend too much time deliberating over the terms of the collaboration that we often do not spend enough time deeply engaging with each other on our respective goals and roles. Second, people and mission as true north. As with all partnerships and collaborations, there will be ups and downs and disagreements. We have heard this many times. Trust me, putting people and mission as the true north really works. Always put the people we're trying to assist and the mission in the center of everything. Irrespective of the nature, scale, and goal of collaboration, what is most significant is the value it brings to the recipients. In any partnership and collaboration, the mission at hand should be the true north, thereby relating to my final point, which is letting go of egos and logos. I think this is a term that Darryl Walker from Ford Foundation used, letting go of egos and logos. Sometimes getting stuck with who gets the credit jeopardizes an otherwise fantastic and high-impact collaboration. Be mindful and sensitive to this. We must give credit where credit is due and always be conscious about the objectives of others, not just our own organization. So friends, I hope I have been able to, that's the last slide, yep. Missed the clicking, sorry. I hope I've been able to provide some insights to our own journey in accelerating our impact and reach through innovative partnership models over the last 2 years. We never expected this to happen, but as we saw with the pandemic, a lot of innovation, a lot of the things that we've been pushing for got accelerated and happened. So there are some silver linings. In Hasana, we have 7 different partnership models, and I've just shared a few with you. Today, Yayasan Hasana is able to impact more people in need and build capacities of civil society organizations through a structure that is agile and able to respond to the needs of the nation. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. An apt African proverb to close my session today. I hope you found the sharing useful, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaira, for reinforcing the need for a robust, high trust-based trifactor collaboration for scale and success, as you have proven yourself in your model. We still have a day and a half of engagement through the various sessions, but this is probably our last opportunity to meet you all here together. So I now invite Nena, our CEO, to greet you one last time here at the plenary.
Hello, everyone. It says closing, but we're not closed. We still have a lot of really interesting sessions, both in the morning and in the afternoon. So I hope you go to see them. But this is our last plenary session together. And so I thought I would take the opportunity just to thank you one last time and also to share some thoughts and some data from us all coming together for the first time after 2019. We started this morning with, I thought, some very powerful messages: humility, audacity, and moral courage. I think we, in Asia, know how to be humble, but I don't think we sometimes know how to be audacious. Or we are audacious, but we don't talk about it. We also then talked about mental health, well-being, and I think, one of my board members who's here right now has always inspired me to talk about being present, to really think about where we are today, and to just take a moment to thank for what has brought us here today, why we are here today, and for the gifts we've received today. It is hard enough for the journey that we are all on to try and address some of the changes, some of the tasks, some of the challenges that we've heard over the last 3 days without taking a moment to really look after ourselves. Mental health, as Richard said, the numbers that actually get affected in the 1,200 people that are here, what did he say, 400 of us would probably be in that statistic. So let's take the time to really look after ourselves, because the journey is long and we need us to be present in that journey, as my dear friend would say. And finally to the wise words that Shahira shared with us. You know, collaboration, let's not forget the last 2 years. We all came together because we'd never seen anything like it, right? We'd never been in any kind of challenging situation such as the one we faced in the last 2 years. All of us were touched by it. I don't think there is a single person that was not touched by it. We lost loved ones, we got sick, we were worried, we were separated from our loved ones, and it affected us all irrespective of our economic status, where we came from, where we live. The collaborations that we forged in these difficult years, we should continue. Just because we're going back to normal, it doesn't mean that we forget that we can go together. We made friends with really unlikely allies. We held hands with people that we hadn't talked to before. Let's continue that as we go ahead. And let's not forget that to go through challenges, we need to do it together. So I want to thank all of you that despite some of you having very, very difficult situations, long travels, and some of you really taking a risk and coming here, you came here in really large numbers. I understand from my team that we've had 1,096 of you physically present over the last 3 days. That is amazing. 338 of you spoke. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, sharing your challenges, sharing your successes with us. 6,926 connections were made, so keep those connections up. Remember to talk to them even after you leave. 5,607 discussion posts were created using the app. You had apparently set up, and I'm sure this is much more than that, 583 meetings. This is only what my DT team could track. There were 119 sessions and 114 average registrations per session. In addition, I believe 221 of the 1,096 actually traveled from locations where when they go back, they will have to do some sort of quarantine or the other. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for making that effort and making that sacrifice just to be with us. I look forward to seeing you next year. We have the dates of the conference. I believe it's going to be the 13th to the 15th of June. We'll send you out something. Promise not to do 2 emails a week now that the conference is over, even though, you know, apparently being a little bit aggressive is a good thing. But we will send out some details about how and where and what the conference next year will be. But once again, thank you so much, and thank you for being present with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Nena. At this episode of the AVPN Annual Conference 2002, this is the last opportunity to address all of you here. So I'm joined by the entire AVPN team who's really put in a piece of their heart in putting this event together, to thank you all for being here in these numbers and from afar and through difficulties like Nena had acknowledged. So thank you very, very much. I'd just like to say that in India, there is no word for bye. It is always see you later, as I believe is in Indonesian as well. So fir milenge in Hindi or sampai berjumpa kembali. I hope I'm saying that right, but see you later.